Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. With us today is Lionel, legal scholar, legal analyst, and of course a lawyer himself, and of course Peter Lavelle, who's also host of RT's talk show Crosstalk. We're talking about the Supreme Court, and what has transpired in the last few days is the fury of the Democrats. I mean, the Democrats who are afraid that they're not going to get their own way on the replacement of the deceased Justice Ginsburg are now threatening to rain hell and fury on the United States. They are threatening to grant statehood to D.C., statehood to Puerto Rico. They are planning the nuclear option in the Senate, which is to end the filibuster rule.
Abolish the electoral college.
Yeah, abolish the electoral college. And of course, down the road in a Biden administration will be a amnesty, essentially a blanket amnesty. And who knows, 30, 40, 50 million, we don't know how many illegals there are in the United States, will be on the fast track to citizenship and thereby give the Democrats permanent majority.
George, you forgot one thing, lowering the voting age to 16.
Yes, and lowering, as Peter says, lowering the voting age to 16. Now, this is all very drastic, and it's far from clear that they'll be able to achieve all of that. But there is something very chilling about any political party that issues these threats, not because there is any kind of any merit to any of these proposals. They're not saying these proposals have any merit, but that they will ensure power for us. And that is rather frightening. What's your take, Lionel?
By the way, you did leave out one thing too, voting by telepathy, which is what I because we are completely destroying the notion of the vote. But let me let me channel James Madison or one of my favorite justices, Bushrod Washington, one of the forgotten jurists of that. They would tell you, gentlemen, that is precisely the risk of this republic, not democracy, but this republic. In the event they wanted to do all or any of the aforementioned, they can do it, provided they do so according to law, provided they do not violate the law in doing it. That's a problem. But what you gentlemen, I think, are talking about, which is most important, is simply this. You know, there's an expression, it takes two wings for a bird to fly. Whenever you have any majority, it sounds great until you realize there's nothing to create the balance. I am not a conservative. I'm not a liberal. I'm not any of that. I don't like the idea of a potential 6-3 Supreme Court, whatever that means, or 7-2 in the event that Breyer leaves. I like there to be
tension,
yin and yang, and left and right, and yes, tension. And the speaking of this, I've got to tell you something, and I'm going to say this. This may not be a juridical analysis, but it's one as a citizen. There has never been this fractious schizoid, with all due respect to schizophrenics, but this schizoid behavior that is going on right now. It's almost as though whatever they can do to destroy the order and the functionality of the republic, they'll do it. It doesn't matter what it is. 16-year-olds voting, okay, maybe. Prisoners. How about people who have lost historically in our country? When you are a convicted felon, you lose civil rights. And those civil rights have been the right to to possess a firearm, serve as a juror, run for office, do different things. You can have those restored. These might be a bit arcane and a bit hoary, to use that term, but that's kind of the way we've done it. Well, when you see Nancy Pelosi speak, it's as almost though she is saying, whatever I can do to upset this country, whatever I can do to change it, whatever it is, we'll do it. But I'm sorry.
No, I was going to mention exactly the same point, because you can have the tyranny of the majority. And this is, if you go to the Federalist Papers, they've thought about this very, very carefully. And And when you have this kind of tyranny of the majority, you close off other political discourses, because then you have a majority of power, and that's what it's all about. And that short circuits the whole purpose of having a democracy, because if you take over all branches of government, then there's no tension to keep you in line, okay? And I very much worry about that. That affects so many things. On the Second Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of religious expression. Who knows? Maybe even assembly here. And we've seen how they've used the COVID crisis to determine what assembly means and what it doesn't mean. And it's very, very unhealthy for everyone involved. You're absolutely right. I mean, the prospect, all of the things that we have mentioned here, that's a power project that can last a generation until it completely breaks down and is dysfunctional here. This is not an agenda of representation. It's an agenda of power.
Well, there's also something which is even more frightening. Let's assume that this current iteration of Democrats were to win the majority. Republicans, right-wing, conservative, whatever, they're gone. Now, within this new Democratic, you will have internecine fighting, which will then go for more of a concentrated form. Is it going to be the AOC left with the Green New Deal and this kind of an amorphous leftist? And by the way, I've got to tell you, gentlemen, this. In this country, nobody understands what Marxist, Marxian, socialist, communist, that's a word they use for anything that is bad or that is whatever. But AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, this new version of the Democratic Party, they keep calling her a Marxist, and Bernie Sanders is a Marxist. But let's assume that she wins. Now you're going to have the Democrats going from this to this. And then within that group, you have another purity test to see who can really show their bona fides to be ultra leftist, and you will ultimately end up with this pure form of strychnine or poison or something without any countervailing arguments to dilute it, to perhaps maybe persuade people. That's the problem. But may I just say something about the myth of our Constitution? Because I love our country, but people like Scalia say, we've got to read the text. Well, there was a time when Justice Roger Taney read the text and came up with the Dred Scott decision. That was considered constitutional until somebody said, wait a minute. Then we had Plessy against Ferguson, which was basically the precursor to Brown against Board of Education, which allowed for separate but equal, until somebody said, wait a minute.
Yeah, but that's the point. No, but that's the point.
That's exactly the point.
You can never, that's it. You can never really guarantee that your side is going to be on top. Remember, we had the Warren Court, and they made these historic rulings, Miranda, school prayer, so on. Well, what happened to the Warren Court? Then it gave way to the Rehnquist Court. Now we have the Roberts Court. The notion that somehow one side is always going to be in control of the Supreme Court is ridiculous. Same with this electoral college. I mean, the idea that, if we get rid of the electoral college, the Democrats are always going to win elections. No, the Republicans will then realize we've got to pursue a different strategy. Instead of ignoring New York and California, we're going to campaign fiercely because there are conservative voters in New York and California. That's where the votes are. We'll ignore all those battleground states. We'll just go where are the numbers. So, you can't assume that things are going to go your own way.
I got to push back against I see your point, and it's an excellent point here. But, if you are head of every single electoral board, you are the toxin called gerrymandering is so appealing. What I'm just saying is that if you give people this kind of power, they will have the institutional power to thwart you every step of the way. That's what I'm worried about. And to Lionel's point here, and I will bring up a historical reference that I know well, is that it's essentially what we're getting is that when Lenin said that there would be no factions within the party, okay, outlawing factions. That's what Lionel is talking about here, where you have to agree with the Central Committee. Okay, it has to be from the top down. That again is short-circuiting, ending the democratic process. Lionel.
And I want to just bring up one point to maybe better clarify what I was trying to do. We believe that this Constitution is this pure, that once you refer to it, you will always get the correct answer. What I meant to say, gentlemen, was that when I cited those other cases, which clearly we think are ridiculous, at the time, they were applying the same Constitution we've got. Justice Taney had the same one we did, and he swore, but I'm following the strict construction. So if you think, it's like when we talk about defining what is jazz versus pop versus, we can spend the rest of our lives, even though we are, Peter, you were a musicologist, you write articles and you know what's going on, but the drafters of our Constitution, and I think most countries would say, good, that's the debate. It's not perfect. Listen, if we had a machine, we could just put the variables in and you get the answer. We wouldn't need any of this. But what we're saying right now is, and I'm going to say this, you have no idea the degree of nescient, ignorant, the voters who don't know anything about history. There's also these hagiographies, this, I call it automorn. RBG has been elevated to this apotheosis, this beatification, the greatest human being who has ever lived. We do this. There's this scrum, there's this funereal, this elevation. She's okay. She was good. I mean, listen, I don't want to, she had pancreatic cancer. God bless her. But
Lionel, this hero worship doesn't talk about her policies. Again, this is a cult of personality. Sorry, George, I know we're running out of time.
That's the point, that these judges particularly are there for life, and they're allowed to stay for life. There's no mandatory retirement age. So they're basically allowed to go on and on, even though, I mean, she's had cancer for years. How was she really able to perform her duties? I mean, it's absurd. I mean, the notion that she could sit there while she's getting all this chemotherapy and so whatnot, and all these masses and masses of legal documents, I find it difficult to believe. She clung on for one reason only. She wanted Hillary Clinton to replace her. And that's irresponsible. And that's the and that's the point where these justices, it is irresponsible to place so much power into the hands of people who are basically don't run for elective office and can just have lifetime appointments.
But that's the thing. The fact that they don't run for elective office gives them the purity of decision. They don't have to worry about this. They can not have to run for re-election, and that their decisions will be more determined and more thoughtful, because they've been absolved of having to run and please people. Well, that's great. Until somebody's 99 years old walking around like Joe Biden, out of a root cellar yelling, "Who ordered the veal cutlet?" Like Rehnquist, by the way, when Rehnquist was taking all kinds of drugs and Placidil, and he was playing a lot of Cream and Jimi Hendrix, and they thought, this is not right. But that happens.
Yeah. No, that's it. And I think that's the problem, as they say, of the hero worship and granting extraordinary powers to people who don't run for elective office. And I think this is why
I'll end on this. All of the threats that are being made right now from the left, it shows their disdain for the democratic process. You can't win in Congress, you can't win with elected officials, then you turn it over to the court, and then you hero worship and you'll get your way. It's like a juvenile delinquent thinking about politics.
Right. And I think that's exactly why we got into this very destructive, poisonous fight at the moment. Well, thank you very much, Lionel, Peter. Fascinating discussion to be continued. And remember, if you like The Gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.